Hello and welcome back to Jules Math Tools. In our session today, we are solving this algebraic equation. And if you're ready, let's get started. Okay, when solving these types of algebraic equations, especially when parentheses are involved, remember that you always go back to apply in your rules for PEMDAS, which tells us that we're to solve our parentheses first. So I'm going to begin by solving my first parentheses. And this parentheses, we are applying our distributive property. And our distributive property tells us that we are to distribute, or we are to share whatever term is outside of our brackets to everything that is inside the bracket. Now I have an entire series on distributive property where there are multiple videos involved. I will also post the link to that series in the description box below, so that if you need to get a refresher on how the distributive property works, you can get an idea on how to solve those types of equations. I also have videos on one-step equations that can help you to build your skills up to this point as well. So we're going to be multiplying 4 times 1, well, our negative 4 times 1, and also our negative 4 will be multiplied to our negative 3x. And when negative 4 is multiplied to 1, that's negative 4, and negative 4 times negative 3 will give us a plus 12x. And on our left hand side, we'll just return the 3x back to our equation. So now that we're done simplifying the left hand side of our equation, we're now going to be simplifying the right hand side of our equation. And just like our previous bracket with our negative 4, we're also going to apply the distributive property on this side of the equation as well. Now, one of the things that I have to point out when it comes to parentheses or brackets like the one that we're looking at here, remember that even though we have the minus sign here, remember that it is said that we have a 1 in front of the brackets. Even though the 1 is not written, remember that this still means that we're multiplying by a negative 1. So we have our negative 1 times x will give us negative x, and our negative 1 times positive 1 will give us a negative 1. And we're going to return our 2x back to our equation. And now I'm going to simplify the left hand side of my equation. So on the left hand side, I have like terms with 3x and 12x. And since the 12x is being added, that means 3x plus 12x will give me 15x. And since I did not use the negative 4, I will return that back to my equation. And on the right hand side, I can again simplify my 2x minus x, which will equal to x. And I'm going to return the minus 1 back to the equation. So now this is where we apply our rules for collecting like terms across our equal sign. And the first thing I'm going to do is collect my like terms with my x's. And since my x on the right hand side is positive, that means when it comes to the right hand side of the left hand side of my equation, I'm going to minus that x from my equation. So I'll have 15x minus x is going to give me 14x. And I still have my minus 4, and this is equal to my negative 1. And now I'm going to collect my like terms, and since my negative 4 is being subtracted here, I'm going to be adding 4 to both sides of my equation. And I also have videos on solving equations when we're working with variables or terms on both sides of the equation. So if you need to see that video to help you through the process, I will also have a link for that posted below. So we now have our 14x, and negative 1 plus 4 will give us a positive 3. And now we're going to apply our two-step rules our one-step equation rules when we are multiplying. And that means I'm going to be dividing 14 by both sides of the equation to get my x on one side of the equation by itself. My 14s will cancel, and therefore my x is equal to 3/14. Okay, and I'm going to leave that as a fraction. And now on our next slide, we are going to perform our most important step, which is to check our answer. And I can't express to you how important this is with algebra, because that's one of the great things actually about algebra, is that we can always check our answer before we turn in our assignment. So checking your answer not only will help you to see if your answer is correct, but it can also help you develop your substitution rule skills as well. So we're going to be substituting 3/14, and it'll help for this type of question especially. It's going to help you to build your fraction skills. So if you're one of those persons who are not so great with fraction, a question like this will definitely help you to build those skills up. So that's another positive thing about checking your answer with this question. Okay, so remember to always check your answer after you solve your equation. So I'm substituting my x for 3/14 everywhere in my equation. So everywhere I'm going to be plugging in that 3/14, and then I'm going to begin simplifying wherever it's possible. So my first bracket, I'm going to be multiplying 3 times 3. And remember that your whole number 3 is always multiplied to the numerator and not to the denominator, or to both. It's only multiplied to the numerator. 9/14, which is going to be minusing. I'm going to put back my -4. And again, we're doing the same thing inside of our parentheses, where I'm going to be multiplying my 3 times my 3. And then we're going to come back and apply our distributive property. We're still going to have to do that as well. So we are not in no way skipping that step. And on our right hand side, 2 times 3 is going to give us 6/14. Minus, and my 3/14 is already simplified, so I'm just going to put that back, and then we're going to come back and just simplify all of our parentheses in the same step. Okay, so now let's apply our distributive property. So I'm putting back my 9/14. We're not going to be doing anything with that. Minus, and remember 4 times 1 is going to give us -4, and -4 times 9 is going to give us positive 36/14. And if you notice, I haven't simplified any of my parentheses as yet, and the reason not my parentheses, my fractions as yet, and the reason I decided not to do that is simply because I'm working with fractions, as you can see in most parts of this question, and the last thing I want to do is simplify my fraction and then have to perform more work by finding the LCM so that I can solve this or simplify this equation even more. Now with this equation, since all of my denominators in my fraction are 14, that means that my LCD, which means the same thing as your LCM, just the lowest common denominator, is 14. So that means I'm now going to be changing all of the denominators in my fraction to a denominator of 14, and then we'll solve everything else from there. So since 9/14 already have a denominator of 14, I'm going to put that back. Now with my -14, I'm going to have to multiply 14 times 4 to get what my numerator is. So 4 times 4 is 16. We put our 6, carry the 1. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 will give us 5. So we now have minus 56/14 plus my 36/14, which is equal to, putting back our 6/14 minus our 3/14. And we know that 14 times 1 is going to give us -14 over 14. So now that we have all of our denominators the same, we're going to do that little trick with algebra where we're now going to eliminate our denominator and just focus on our terms in our numerators. So that's all we're going to be doing now to simplify and solve this equation. And remember that for this equation, everything has to be equal on both sides. That's what this equal sign means, that whatever we have on the left is equal to whatever is on the right. So that means that when we finish solving everything, they need to be equal to the same number or the same answer on both sides of our equation. And once it does that, that means that our answer x is equal to 314 is indeed our correct answer. Okay, so I'm going to begin working this one out with my negative 56. That is adding my 36, and I'll deal with the 9 last. And remember that whenever you have two unlike signs with negatives, we always subtract the number regardless of what's happening. We always subtract the numbers. So we're going to subtract first. So 6 minus 6 is 0. 5 minus 3 is 2. And then we're going to keep the sign of the large number, which is 56. So my 20 is going to remain as a negative. And now I'm going to be adding 9 to that 20. And again, signs are different. We're going to subtract. So 20 minus 9 is 11. And we're going to keep the sign of the larger number, which is our 20. So we have negative 11 on the left-hand side of our equation. And on the right-hand side, I have 6 minus 3, which is equal to 3. And then I have negative 14 minus 3. And again, we're going to subtract the numbers as usual. So 14 minus 3 is going to be 11. And we're going to keep the sign of our larger number, which is the minus on the 14. So we can see that both sides of our equation equals to negative 11, which means that my x equals 3/14 is indeed the correct answer. So take your time as you solve these type of equations. It may seem a bit crazy and a bit tricky at first, but as you practice, you will get better. So remember that once you solve the equation, always check your answer to confirm whether the answer that you got for your question is indeed correct. And until next time, this is Jules Math Tools, where math is made easy.